Now we move into Susan's extraordinary experiences. Precognitive dreams, walking visions, and moments that seem to defy logic. But what makes these stories powerful isn't mystery itself, it's what she does next. Again and again, Susan turns unexplained experiences into practical acts of love. Warning someone in danger, making a phone call, helping someone in need. And in this segment, we'll explore a powerful spiritual principle that true religion isn't about chasing mystical experiences. It's about how we respond to life. So, Susan, tell us more of your experiences. I mean, we were just talking about the deja vu and how dreams can be a glimpse into the future, these instances where we connect with spirit. So, what other situations have you experienced and what explanations? Because I think they're great.
Well, um, first of all, let's do a fun one. Let's do a happy one. Um,
Okay.
I actually had the precognition of um, a couple of different times of grandkids being born in my family. I actually
Okay.
saw the baby born before it was born, and before anyone was expecting, to be honest. And I'm still waiting on one that I've seen that hasn't been born yet. But it was like, one of my granddaughters, I saw that she's gonna have a little girl. She's not married yet, so that's still to come, but it's one of those things that, I have these pending ones that I know are gonna happen because 2 of my grandchildren that were born, I saw before they were born, and I knew exactly what they were gonna look like as babies when they were born. I mean, not all babies look alike, but as they were growing up, I knew
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
it would be like. And so that was kind of fun. So let's put that aside. But one of the things I would say about the dreams, as far as the past goes, um, the drowning of the little girl drowning in the lake by my house. I
Okay.
saw the vision of this little girl. I could tell it was a little girl, little child in the water, under the water, lifeless, and much the reeds and stuff around her. And I
Okay.
knew exactly that it was right at the corner of my lot where there was um, a drainage pipe, I guess you would say, that drained the lake off into another area, evidently. But anyway, I saw the little child there, and it wigged me out. It really did bother me because I thought, oh my gosh, not on my watch. My grandkids are not gonna get near the water unless I'm holding their hand, and so whenever they would be over and they'd be playing, they never were unwatched. I was always outside making sure, and they knew you don't go this any closer than this. There was a tree back there, so you never go beyond the tree toward the water unless
Mm-hmm.
Nani's holding your hand and I'm with you,
Yeah.
and that was the rule. And so several years went by, and I was working a job with a lady who was our HR manager, and she came to me one time and she said, like, Susan, you're so lucky that you live so close to work, because I lived just a few blocks from work. She said,
Mm-hmm.
you're so lucky, I'm running late today, but you're here in a couple of minutes, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I hadn't known this before, but I had this dream, and it always worried me. And she said, my cousin used to live over there in in your spot where I bought a mobile home, a new mobile home, and had it
Mm-hmm.
moved, chose the lot, and didn't know anything about it or about the history of it or anything. I bought the new home and I moved it in. It was an empty
Mm-hmm.
lot available. And so she's like, I don't know if you know this or not, but my cousin used to live over there in the spot where you moved your house, and her
Okay.
daughter drowned in the lake there. So it was so crazy because then the connection was
So it
made
was it was in the exact spot where you were,
where I moved my house. Yeah, she had
and
lived
you
there.
knew the person, so you had a relationship with the
Yeah,
person.
she was
So
my HR manager, but I had never known that she had a cousin
yeah,
that had
yeah, yeah. The
lost
connection
all of
wasn't.
that was unknown. So that was just the experience, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I had this dream about this little girl, and I've always worried about my grandkids, being near the water." And she's like, "Yeah, she lost her daughter there, and then she, of course, moved away."
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's That's so interesting, and I mean, now that you're mentioning that, and a little bit of what I liked to study, when I was a kid, you know, and this is not from the Urantia book, the what happens with your soul and with your spirit when I mean, with your personality, with yourself when you evolve. But there's some charges, there's some energetic charges. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like the residue, the energetic residue, but I remember that, you always have the different types of ghosts, and we're gonna go, talk about ghost stories and these energies. Let's say they have a tendency to either fixate to a person or fixate. I mean, there's other two, but the main two is to a person, to situation, so they relive a situation. Those are the ones that you find like in a highway, you know, or a place, a situation. And this is like a house, and this is something like a drowning. That is something that was a situation. So this is something that, there's a probably like an imprint in the energy, in time, time and space, that is just there. I don't know if it's the actual person, the actual spirit, and that communicated. Of course not. I don't know, but I don't know. What's your take on that, Susan?
I've questioned that myself. We don't have all the answers, but I've also wondered if there is some kind of attachment to locations of
Hmm.
the imprint of the energy of what happened there.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
I know there. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe people have gone on to be resurrected and they're not here. But I do believe there's something there. And that dream that I had, I believe it was connecting to the inner spirit. That wasn't precognition because it's something that
Yeah,
already
yeah, no, no, yeah.
that was actually a vision of the past. And of course the adjuster is timeless. So somehow I caught that
Yeah, the maybe the
glimpse.
like we were saying, and we both agree, I mean, it's something that, just from this conversation, I realized that we both agree on this, is that, there's this imprint, and especially when something is traumatic,
Mhm.
you know, I'm going to tell you, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about your stories, but let me tell you this story. And I've always realized, and I've always, not just in my situations, but seen and heard of a lot of people tell you the same thing, that right after somebody dies, they are visited by the person, they have the spirit of the person visit them. So there was one instance in Mexico, with my oldest daughter. She was probably probably 6 years old, 7 years old, around there. Yeah, probably 6, 7 years old. And the person that used to help us in our house died in an operation, and it was very sad because, I mean, a very tragic story. She went into, for surgery, and she died right after the procedure, kind of day after. And this was at the middle of the night. This was 4 in the morning, and my wife gets a call. You get those calls in the middle of the morning, and it was their
Oh,
children, this lady's kids, calling my wife, telling her. And we come out, and my daughter's in our room. My other son was very young. I mean, he was probably 1 or 2. We go outside of the room, and where she said at the phone, and she starts crying, and she tells me that the lady just died. And then suddenly my daughter screams, and we run into the room, and she says that the lady was there with her, and at that exact time. It was just moments after she passed. So, I mean, this isn't coincidence, and this isn't the only time that I've had similar things happen. What's your take on that?
actually, I was raised on a story like that from my grandma. She had an
Okay.
experience similar to that. Where she had heard a knock at the door and no one was there. She did it a couple of different times. And then the third time she had heard her uncle call her name and knock at the door and she went and there was no one there, but she got a telegram that he had passed away. So it's kind of a weird timing like that too. And I always I always think, the angels are they're in charge of your soul and all of that when you die. And I almost wonder if sometimes the angels are involved in appearances like that, that they might be able to project themselves as, or give the impression of the person, just to be a comfort in some way. And I don't know what their goal is, but
Or
sometimes it is.
maybe you
Yeah,
have like a goodbye a message for, certain people you
right.
have, and they just go and broadcast that, like a hologram. I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, sometimes people say they smell a favorite fragrance that they associate with someone, or you
and
know,
it's
my-
usually saying goodbye. A lot of them is, they came to say goodbye. That's what they say.
yeah, you're cared for by that person. And my
Yeah.
grandma felt that way about her uncle. It was a favorite uncle, and she felt like that was it took the shock away from the news that he had passed, because she was already
Okay.
thinking, he was at the door knocking and had called her name. Anyway, yeah, that's a little bit of that, but yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of
Yeah.
people have experiences and we can't maybe explain it, but we know, you can't say what's real to someone else any more
Yeah,
than,
definitely.
we only know our own experience. A lot of people have experienced things like that.
Definitely, definitely. Well,
Yeah.
it's in the experiences, I think, that you find more answers. So tell us more of your experiences. I mean, if you have more on these the precognitive dreams, and before we go into the walking visions that you also have, but do you have other of these dreams that you've had?
Well, I will give you an example of another thing. And, a lot of times these reactions you're talking about, are based on previous experiences that maybe have taught us what to do or whatever. This is an example of that I'm going to tell you about. My husband actually was wakened from sleep on a Saturday evening
Mm-hmm.
and woke up from a dream, and he was crying. And he said he had the sense that the neighbor lady was coming to him, trying to get him to help his dad because his dad was sick, which was my father in law.
Mm-hmm.
So, I tried to say, it's a dream. Don't worry. It's a dream. His father was fine. His father was healthy. He had just retired and was enjoying, the first year of his retirement, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, let's go back to sleep. This was like early in the morning hours. And so we went back to sleep, and it was like an hour later, he woke up with the same dream again. And it really shook him because he thought, and this is a tough guy, he was a tough guy. Um, and he was like, no, this is real. Something's going on here. And I, it happened a third time. I said, let's go to sleep. There's no reason to get upset about it.
Yeah.
And so the third time it happened, then he felt convinced that something he needed to do something to help his dad. And knowing his dad, I said, "What are you going to do? What are you going to say to your dad? Dad, I had a
Yeah.
dream. You need to go to the doctor." And his dad was, he was a tough guy too. He was like, "I feel fine. No, you
Yeah,
know." Well, I
crazy
said, "What?
mumbo jumbo,
Hey,
your crazy stuff. Yeah.
right, right." And so I basically have the guilt of talking him out of asking his
Okay.
dad to go to the doctor. And um, it was exactly a week later on a Saturday in the middle of the night. The phone rang, and we knew. We knew before we even answered the phone that his dad had died.
Really.
And that was the call that his dad had passed away from a heart attack. So later, when his wife, my mother-in-law, I
Uh-huh.
was brushing my teeth in the morning, totally not even thinking about her, just starting my day, brushing my teeth in the mirror, brushing my teeth. And all of a sudden, I get a picture. And by the way, I should, set this up. She was a beautiful woman, very glamorous. And my kids are all beautiful like her. And she always was fixing up. And they had their 35th anniversary, and I made her a beautiful corsage to wear for their special picture that they were going to have taken. And she told me, she goes, Susie, make sure that I've got my corsage, on. I've got all my grave clothes laid out, my jewelry I want, my corsage, my
Yeah.
kid's beautiful gown ready. And so I had seen it. She showed it to me. And so I'm brushing my teeth, and all of a sudden in the mirror, instead of my face, there flashes this image of her dead in her grave clothes with the corsage on, the whole bit.
Really.
Totally recognizable from everything she had shown me before. And I instantly just cried. I had the sense, okay, she's dead. When I knew she hadn't been dead, obviously. So my first reaction was it shook me up, you know. And I thought, well, I have to do something because we didn't do something before and his father passed away. I have to do something now, to
Mm-hmm.
help her. So I called her up and I said, Mom, or how are you feeling? How are you doing? And she's like, I feel a little weird, but I'm okay. I said, because and she was a big believer in dreams. She'd get the book,
Okay.
Interpret Dreams and all that. I don't know how successful that all was. And I don't do that myself, but I figure if a dream is garbled, I usually forget them anyway. But I figure if I'm meant to know, I'm going to know. I don't
Yeah.
need to look in a book. Anyway, but she believed in that. And I said, Mom, I had a dream and I want you to I want you to go and get an opinion from the doctor. I want you to get checked out because I had a dream that that you might be sick or something. I want to get
Yeah. Yeah.
that opinion, just that you're okay. And she's, well, I do feel a little weird. And so we called her doctor and they gave us a little bit of trouble about it because she didn't have an appointment. And I said, I have to insist, she was on heart medication. I said, then let's get her to the heart doctor. Let's get a second opinion. That's
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
idea, And they said, well, we can't do it without a referral from the doctor. So had to call back to the doctor and they gave us a hassle. And I said, listen, I'm going to be down there in 15 minutes for that referral. I want it written out when I get there and ready to go. And I don't know where all that came from, but it was like, it was either get her in or I felt like she was going to be dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of brought out a new gear in me. I don't know. I just said it.
Yeah.
And
You
then
were determined to get that done, of
yeah,
course.
so I got it, the paper, and I called the other doctor. I said, we're on our way. So I got her in, and the heart doctor, called an ambulance for her to be taken immediately to the hospital from his office. And he is the one that took over from there. And he found out over the next few days, well, she had kidney failure. And
Really.
he said she wouldn't have lived another 24 hours.
Really? So that was, oh God, that's very interesting, Susan.
And it was all the medicines that she had been prescribed that were not working well with each other that had caused this kidney failure.
Yeah, they can really mess you up, of course.
Yeah. And so it got all straightened out and she lived for years after that. But she, when I told her the story about it, of course, she was glad that, at the time though, it was awkward because she was like, why are you making such a fuss?
Yeah, yeah, of course. But definitely, definitely. I mean, it's always trusting that sixth sense. I mean, if and even that sixth sense, if it's so clear, you have to act on it. And glad that you did. That really saved her life. I mean, that's so important. Before we close this segment, I have another story. And this one is, I think, I don't know if I talked about this with you. It was what happened on the eve of 9/11.
Yeah.
I was in the U.S. I was in San Antonio, Texas, actually, and I was sleeping in the couch, right in front of the TV. Back in the day, I think it wasn't flat screen. It was, the big old TVs. Remember, I watched the football game that night. It was Monday night, New York against Denver. I remember that. So, anyways, long story short, I turned off the TV and I went to sleep. And I remember around in between 1 or 2 in the morning, I got up and I was with such fear. I was overcome with fear and panic. When like the kind of fear when you're a kid, that's really there's no, it's irrational that you run to your parents' room. I remember going to the kitchen and looking at the skyline of San Antonio, really scared. And it was like and this is what I felt like the devil was loose. That's what I felt. So the next day I remember, because I was watching the game, I had that channel on, and right in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 in the morning, put on the TV. It was central, so I don't remember the exact time. Put on the TV, and you had the tower, just one of them on fire. So interesting, how you can get these precognitive glimpses, as you say.
Yeah, some people refer to that as a premonition.
Yeah,
Well, definitely, there was something there that was letting you know that there was about something to happen. That was
definitely. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.